Welcome to the Storypowers Podcast, the show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, keynote speaker and storytelling coach, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Mark Brown. In 1995, Mark defeated more than 20,000 contestants from 14 countries to become the Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking. Since then, he has delivered more than 3,500 presentations to more than 1.5 million people over 5 continents. Mark is also the co-author of the book The Speaker's Edge and co-host of the weekly podcast Unforgettable Presentations. But Mark is much more than a triple threat. He speaks, he sings, he coaches world champions, and he never seems to grow old. Mark is so popular, there are children in the Ukraine who imitate his laugh, and he's so good that the only person who ever beat him was Anne Frank. Ladies and gentlemen, the man, the legend, Mark Brown. Mark, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Francisco. You're very, very kind. I'll have to pay you later for that wonderful introduction. How does that sound?
Well, Mark, you make it easy. There are so many things to pick from. I left quite a few of them out of the intro. I might come back to some of the stuff. But out of all of these achievements, there is one that I envy you more than any of this other stuff. And is that you can actually tie a bow tie.
Ah, yes. Well, the story behind a bow tie is very simple. My youngest son, who is now 26, when he was in secondary school, high school, he used to wear a bow tie on Thursdays. He and his friends. I don't know why they did that. And, we had, clip-on bow ties, you hook on, lying around. And somebody somehow had placed a couple of self-tie bow ties into his hands. Well, he kind of outgrew the bow tie thing. He became too cool for that. But they're lying around. And one day I said, you know what, I want to wear a bow tie. I wore a clip-on, it was nice. Tuxedo, you clip on, it's fine. But then they had these bow ties lying there, and I had to get a teacher. And anyone who wants to accomplish something should consult a teacher or a coach. So I consulted the best coach I know. You may have heard of him. His name is YouTube. And I went to YouTube and I learned how to tie a bow tie. And I have become...
That is a temperamental coach. I occasionally go there to learn something, and then I spend 5 hours checking out the American Idol auditions.
You are in the YouTube rabbit hole, my friend. You get lost in the weeds. Yes.
But well, I heard you say this thing about the bow tie. How the bow ties you wear are you properly tie them manually, and I always flash back to the very first time I had to wear a tuxedo. So this was a big corporate party, and so my wife is dressed beautifully, and I've got this tuxedo, and I got the bow tie, and I thought, I'm gonna get a real bow tie. I'm not gonna be one of the sorry people that get a clip on. and then at some point my wife finished getting ready, which takes a fair bit of time, and she came out, and I was on the verge of tears in front of the mirror, saying, I cannot do this, I cannot tie this thing.
So
I missed the whole cocktail.
Oh my goodness!
Hour because I was trying to do this thing. So clip on for me.
I understand.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I don't
that's
get
okay.
your
It took me a while to get it right, but then after a while, it just happened. And I found out I have so many bow ties now, and I get gifts as bow ties. And a few years ago, it became my signature. So if anyone goes to my website, goes online and sees any current photograph of me, you'll see me with a bow tie. And it's the real deal. I do tie them manually. It has become part of my identity. People know, oh, he's a bow tie guy. And, I'm not the only one who does that, but it became my thing. And I'm at an age now where I can do so with grace. Just say, and mention my youth. The gray hair will tell you I'm not as young as someone may think. But the bow tie became my trademark. I've only worn a straight tie twice in the last 4 or 5 years. Once was for my daughter's wedding, which I happened to officiate, and she wanted all the gentlemen to wear the same tie. So I wore a straight tie last year in August as I gave my princess away to her husband, Roland, who is a pretty cool guy. So it all works out well, right? And next time you go to an event, it might be wise, as a backup, to just get a clip on, just in case, so you don't miss the cocktail hour. How does that sound?
Every time now. But I like the detail of the bow tie for because it ties very neatly into what we're mostly going to talk about today, which is stories, and that you wearing that bow tie is a very distinctive detail.
Yes.
That makes it easier for people to remember you. So I want to start us off with an easy question, Mark. What makes a story unforgettable?
Before I answer that, I want your listeners to be aware of what you just did. You just said the bow tie ties in very neatly with what we'll talk about. Was that deliberate?
It was no, it was completely accidental.
Okay. Well, part of what makes a story unforgettable are some unique flavors. For example, just now you used a pun and didn't realize you're using it. But to answer the question, part of what makes a story unforgettable is, first, an emotional connection. I happen to have the privilege of working with a man named Michael Haig. He's a Hollywood script consultant. You may have heard of him, you may have not. His company is called Story Mastery. But the joy I have of first of all, consulting with him and saying, I talked to Michael Haig, and then to say, I work with Michael Haig, is the fact that he is a high-profile Hollywood script consultant. Very simply, he was on retainer with an actor, writer, producer named Will Smith. You may have heard of Will Smith.
I heard
exactly.
Of him, yeah. He does some rapping on the side.
But he's probably one of the most well-known actors and filmmakers in the world, and he would consult with Michael Haig. He would not complete a script until he talked to Michael Haig. And Michael Haig simply says the purpose of a story is to elicit emotion. An emotional connection is a levels the playing field. It doesn't matter what your economic background may be, your ethnicity, your religion, your faith, how old you are. If you can connect emotionally with the characters in a story, that's the first thing that makes a story unforgettable. For me, unforgettable characters. A good story may have only one character, but if the character is identifiable, if the character is distinct, if the character is relatable, if the character is visual to us, if we can see the character, if we can understand the character, and if we can not only sympathize, but empathize. And let me clarify. Sympathize, I feel for you. Empathize, I feel with you. So if you can identify the character, understand their pain, feel their pain, empathize with them, and you find yourself almost rooting for them, then the character becomes memorable. If the circumstance is well crafted, if the speaker or writer gives a clear picture of the setting of what's happening, if the context is done in a very clear way where the listener can visualize the character, the circumstance, it also helps. And another level would be the use of dialogue within a story where appropriate. In other words, don't report what happened, transport us to what happened. So one of my mantras is, don't report, transport. So first, identify a character. Well, you want emotional connection. And you get the emotional connection from a character you can identify with. No matter what your background may be, you can see some commonality there. You can almost physically see them. You can empathize with them. You understand the context clearly. You can experience a dialogue that will help make a story unforgettable. And I teach people who I work with, my clients, regarding stories and presentations. Don't tell a story or give a speech. Deliver an experience. So when your audience can have the experience of what took place in the story, to me, that helps to make it unforgettable. It could be a long story or a very short story. If you do those things well, the story can be unforgettable.
The way I tend to tell people what every story needs, and I think we're all treading on very similar ground there, but I tend to say to people that every story needs to be relatable, specific, and emotional. So the characters and the situation need to be relatable. There need to be specific details, and more importantly, a specific moment in the story, and it needs to generate emotion. Because if the characters don't feel emotion and they don't care about what's going on, why would we ever?
I
care
totally
about
agree,
what's going
and
on?
I love the fact you mentioned the moment. One of the principles I've been teaching recently, more so, is what was the moment in the story. Some call it a turning point, some call it a crest of the wave, but there a moment when something happens, when the character changes, when the character undergoes an experience, has an aha moment where something changes in the situation. There's a moment there, and sometimes stories have moments because a character may have conflict, which is then escalated to more conflict, and you're then drawn in even more deeply into their story. But the moments are critical because that's when the character changes. That can also affect change in us as the listener and the viewer. So stories are very powerful.
I also think that the moment is what allows us to experience the story other than just listen to it. And I started thinking more strongly about this when I started getting more into storytelling. And then I thought about history class. And history class should have all the elements for the things that interest teenagers. You know, that you have war, you can have sex, you have all this other politics, you have all these things that you would pay to watch in a movie. But I don't remember ever being very excited in history class. And then when I thought about it, what came to me was history class is always a timeline or at best an overview. What you don't do is what someone has just done in a very popular series of books, which is give you the moment-to-moment experience. I think there's some books now. I think one is called A Day in Rome, and the other one is A Day in Athens. So the whole book is one day. What does one day look like? Because then you can genuinely live it. Otherwise, it's it was like this, it was like that, but you're still far away from that.
And I think, in a sense, you look at stage plays that cover 2 hours of people's lives, because you can follow the whole story in real time, it does tend to draw you in very closely. And in storytelling, you don't always have the luxury of an hour to take you through a whole story. But if you construct your story well and have the right number of details, and when I say details, sometimes we can get lost in the weeds. We want to describe the butterflies and the rainbows that were outside. The kids were playing in the pathway, and the dog was running by. They're playing with the frisbee, and they went to watch a football game, and that's nice. But if it doesn't move your story forward, maybe you don't need those particular details at that time for that story and within that particular situation. So, you could get really heavily detailed about that, but I'm glad you mentioned some details are important, especially as they relate to how we see our characters, and the context of the situation. But stories are so powerful to draw us in emotionally, and they can be very, very instructive. They can teach us so much about ourselves and how we can respond in certain situations. And I find that stories are such an integral part of what I do when I deliver my presentations. Even if I'm discussing something like leadership, people get technical talks, but stories are common ground, and stories help us to relate to each other.
Stories, at the end of the day, stories are real life examples. I mean, you don't need to just use real life examples, but a lot of the stories that we use when speaking are real life examples. And I always find funny how when you cannot understand something someone tells you, you say, can you just give me an example?
Exactly.
But when you're trying to explain things to people, you don't do it on the basis of, okay, let me just pick some examples or stories and base my explanation around those. We tend to go high level and use a whole bunch of words until someone actually tells us, okay, but can you tell me something that actually happened so I can ground it in reality?
Well, what I found is, first of all, as human beings, if we go back in time, and I've only lived on this earth for a short time, nigh 60 years. But, again, history class, they talked about going into the, Neanderthal times and seeing these drawings on the walls of men hunting animals. And they go to the hieroglyphics and they see these paintings and these etchings on the wall. They didn't have satellite TV and smartphones back in those days. But I remember growing up in Jamaica back in the 1960s. And as a child, there were times we had scheduled, depending on where you live, power outages, right? You had lamps, you had candles to do your homework, but there was no TV. So someone always told stories. And Mr. Bill Scott down the street, he was the one who would tell us all the African folklore stories of Anansi, the crafty spider, and we had big boy stories. And we were, as kids, were just fascinated. And I love what my friend Darren LaCroix, the 2001 world champion, says. You know, your kids don't come to you at night and say, Mom, bedtime. Mom, Dad, show me a PowerPoint. No, they say, Mom, Dad, tell me a story. My dad read stories to me as a child growing up in Jamaica. I read stories to my children. We have a natural proclivity. We want to hear stories. We tell our lives through our life story. And now we have Instagram stories and Facebook stories and LinkedIn stories, and we tell the world what's going on. So deep down, we really want to hear stories because stories are, again, are wonderful points of connection. So I think it's important for us to understand the power of story and the value of story. And as you said, we can often tend to get technical and give us high-level answers. But when you say, it's kind of like this, they perk up, they listen in. And you said, don't get too lost in too many words. I have to be mindful of that, especially when my audience is comprised of individuals who don't speak my language as their first language. You know, as an English speaker, I know, well, English is a language of commerce. The world speaks English. Yes, but there are other individuals in the audience for whom it may not be the first language. So I need to shorten my sentences and use words with fewer syllables so as not to sound too overly educated and just confuse people. And I found the simplest stories told in the simplest ways with honest hearts are so effective, so effective.
So there's a few things that you said there that I want to pick up on, and I think that ties into something we said before. We talked before about the details, and it's that, you know, you made your name as a world champion of public speaking through Toastmasters, which is an organization that I've been a part of as well for a while. And for anyone who's listening to this and don't know what Toastmasters is, it's the largest organization of public speaking in the world. Now, there's something about the way Toastmasters speeches are that is very different than a lot of other types of speaking. So your speech, for example, shows off a lot of the skills you have. I think Darren likes to call your ninja skills.
Yeah.
So there's imagery, there's rhythm, there's musicality, there's very intelligent plays with words and rhetorical devices and things of that nature. But one impression I've often gotten from friends of mine who've come over to a Toastmaster meeting or who have shown a Toastmaster speech before is that it becomes too much sometimes for people who are not in that world, and in the professional speaking world opposed to the public speaking world, you notice that difference a lot. They're in some ways they're worlds apart. So what I wanted to ask you was, because you've been in both sides of the divide. I mean, you're still very active on Toastmasters, but you've been speaking for corporations for decades. So do you change completely the way you speak when you speak into a company? Do you just tone it down? What do you find that still works fine, and what you sort of have to tweak?
That's a very good question, Francisco. But the truth is, I won the Toastmasters World title in 1995 in the previous millennium, and yes, I do have the VHS.
Literally.
I have the VHS videotape to prove it. But bear in mind, it is a contest. You have 7 minutes to make your audience laugh, cry, and think. It's not enormously easy. So you really kind of go into your toolbox and pull out all the tools you can to create this emotional wave and leave a poignant message in a very short time. And truth be told, Toastmasters does tend to have a bit of a showy style to it. I will gladly concede that. I have changed over the years. My focus there was to have every word be impactful and meaningful, use alliteration, use rhythm, use rhyme, a little singing here and there, use the voice, be a bit dramatic because I'm in a contest. I want to win a contest. I since then took that 7-minute speech and converted it into a 45 to 60-minute program for young people ages 12 through 18 in schools to build on the message, which was about intolerance, indifference and ignorance, how we treat those who are different, in this case, from Disney's Beauty and the Beast. And I made it a program for kids to build better relationships, change their school culture, and treat those who are different in a nicer way. That was a program I had delivered for many, many years. I was giving that program over 200 times a year. It was picked up by the public broadcasting system here in North America, and it was broadcast in the state of Maine. It was produced for a television program, and it was submitted, without my knowledge, to the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and it received an Emmy Award for Outstanding Youth Program. Of course, as you said in my intro, I didn't win the Emmy Award. I lost out to a production of The Diary of Anne Frank, and nobody's going to beat an Anne Frank documentary.
I mean, it's just mean to beat Anne Frank.
But look, I got to go to Boston, Massachusetts. I got to wear a tuxedo, and I got to attend the Emmy Award. So it's kind of cool. But the point I'm making is I did all that back then to win the contest. But when I give my talk to 15-year-old kids, I'm not going to be eloquent. I don't wear a tie and a shirt and a jacket. I wear sneakers. I wear, a pair of slacks and a polo golf shirt. And I'm very conversational because in real life, that's what people want to see. And more now, over time, what I've become aware of is a conversational style is a very credible style. It's a more believable style. So much so, I found myself considering this last night while I was in the shower. I do think in the shower once in a while, Francisco. And I thought to myself, our former president, Barack Obama, would have town hall meetings, and he would travel to this city to have a conversation with the people. He took his coat off. He literally rolled his sleeves up and had a conversation. And I've found more and more now at corporate conventions, you see speakers in jeans and sneakers, just like you and me today, in a nice, comfortable shirt, and they'll wow you with a 1-hour presentation. Wow. So the quote-unquote stuffy, formal eloquence, that really does pervade the Toastmasters world a bit more, particularly in the atmosphere of delivering a contest speech. But the truth is, in real life, I have found the more conversational, the more simple and clear, the more honest, and the simple stories, anecdotes, and tales that I tell. I use my family all the time in my presentations. That's what connects, because you know what? Behind a corporate title, COO, CFO, CEO, is a human being who's a mom or a dad, who's a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister. And their lives be outside the office are like yours and mine. I mean, here we have Francisco, the speaking expert, the podcaster. But you and I both know you're also the dad.
Well, anyone who's ever heard me speak before the children knew about my one success and my many failures as in my romantic life. And now that I have children, the children are a constant subject of most of the talking I do. And I've found the conversational versus more theatrical approach to speaking a while back, and the way I don't think I've invented this, but the way I always think of it is you're going for bar, not Broadway. And one of the things that to me has been a game changer in getting closer to that was just that I stopped writing first. I used to write my speeches, and then even if you're super, 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 super practiced, that they just roll off your tongue, you're still vocalizing written language. Whereas what I do now is I would just tell the main stories of the speech over and over, and if I need to, I'll put some bullet points down just in case I don't forget anything important. But it's always you recording oral communication instead of vocalizing written communication, and that to me makes a big difference.
Well, you know what it is? You understand this, and I've had to kind of drill down with some clients on this. When you always write out your speech, and here's my caveat, here's my qualifier. For the Toastmasters International Speech Contest, you are given 5 to 7 minutes. I chose to write every word deliberately, so I had not only memorized it, but I'd internalized it. But the mistake many people make is they write for the eye what looks good on paper, and not for the ear what sounds good in conversation. So a question I commonly ask my clients is this: okay, I just heard that sentence over there. If you sat down with me and our friend Francisco to get some coffee or tea, would you really say that in that way? Well, no. But it looked good on paper, right? Yeah. But that's not how you talk. To be conversational, you have to be yourself. You can't be the preacher who's on the platform and God said in his word to the so and so and so, and then he's done. When you're done, and after church is over, hey, Francisco, good to see you, buddy. How you been? You know, we laugh about that here in North America, and I'm sure over the world too, but it does happen. We get this speaker man or speaker woman, and then over coffee, we're just a regular person. Why not be the regular person on the platform? What I've learned in my travels across 5 continents, Francisco, is that some cultures emphasize elocution as the art form very, very young in their lives. So they bring that as children into their experience, and they come to Toastmasters and other parts of their speaking life, and they bring the attitude of, I must use elocution, and I must master the spoken word to an art form, and they focus more on the art than on the message. So I always say, bring yourself and your personality to the message, be conversational, and just let me hear what's on your heart. Don't try to find the most fancy word. And look, I'm a wordsmith. I'm a word nerd. I confess it. And once in a while, a big word comes out, but it just seems to fit for me. But if you can't be conversational, you're missing a chance for the audience to get to know the deeper part of who you really are.
There is something about what you just said of being a wordsmith, and I have some notes on your approach to finding stories, and I think it absolutely encapsulates what you just said about being a wordsmith, because these are some of the techniques I have from you about how to find stories. So capture what captures you. Something that amazed you, amused you, or moved you.
Yes.
And the other one, which I think is also very, very good, which is last and first, best and worst.
Yes. You've been doing some research on me. Yeah. Well, very quickly, Darren LaCroix and I, we were in Ukraine 2016 to do a program. We're doing corporate training for a large company in Ukraine. And Darren was taking photographs of everything. I mean, everything. And he saw cars that were parked on the sidewalk, which is very strange in North America. That's normal in Ukraine, obviously. We found out. You literally park on the sidewalk and, wow. And he took these photographs. And he said, you know what? It caught my attention. It captured me. And if you take your mobile device and capture what captures you, what you might find is in your camera roll on your mobile phone or your photo gallery, if you're a lowly Android user like I am, you realize there are photographs that have been there for a long time, and the photographs in themselves are seeds of a story you can tell. Why did you capture that image? Why did you keep it in your phone for 3 or 4 years? Why is that particular photograph the cover photograph or your home page on your phone? For example, here's my home photograph on my phone. It's a picture of my wife, Andrea, and me. You can see her flowers. You can see my little boots on the air. We were renewing our marital vows on the occasion of our 30th wedding anniversary. And that is my homepage because the memory is there, the story is there. And if I were to go deep into the story, you'll find out I've been traveling on the road giving presentations the week of this event. It was going to be a Saturday on our front lawn in our house. I traveled, I was giving speeches all week. I got home late Friday night, and there was so much more still left to be done. I pulled an all-nighter. I didn't go to sleep Friday night. So I looked bright, fully cheerful and nice, but I was exhausted, right? That's a little side story. Who was my best man? My older son. I mean, there's so many stories that come out of one photograph. So I urge you, look in your camera roll or your photo gallery and ask yourself, why is that photograph there? Why did I capture it? And how did it capture me? You capture what captures you. It's a seed for stories. Every single day we have experiences. And if we go through our day and we stop at the end of the day and think to ourselves, okay, over the last 24 hours, what amazed me, what amused me, and what moved me? If you can answer any of those 3 questions, you have the seed for a story. People say, oh, my life is boring. I got nothing fancy happened to me. You don't need fancy. You need relatable, okay? And just to go back over your life, go through the seasons of your life. For example, you go through your high school to college years, okay?
I don't want to go back.
But you know, one reason is you know some of the stories you don't want to tell, right?
I'm not sure I need to revisit that mental and emotional space.
But now you mentioned earlier. Okay, the other one was best and first, last and worst. Okay, and best and worst, last and first. I won't jump into all of them. You get the idea. You talked about earlier your relationships and all your failed relationships and the one good one you have. If you, just for fun, Francisco, were to think about your best girlfriend or your worst girlfriend, your last girlfriend or your first girlfriend, and take any noun you want: best car, worst car, last car, first car, best date, worst date, your last date, even with your wife, your first date. You could pick any noun, any experience, and just take the best, worst, last, first, and before you know it, you have a catalog of stories. So I tell people, maintain a story file in whatever medium you choose to use. You could use a computer software, OneNote. You could use a Microsoft Doc or a Google Doc. You keep changing it. Whatever works for you. You could use a handheld device. On my handheld device, I have an app called InkPad, a Google app, which syncs to my computer. I can go on my laptop, on a desktop, on my phone. It's all synced into the cloud. But keep stories, keep ideas. Look at your experiences. Your experiences are the seeds for your stories. And one bonus. You know this to be true, Francisco. Family. Family and family gatherings are just fodder for stories. Family birthdays, family anniversaries, weddings, get-togethers, the child's birthday, just anything your family does. Who's your funniest family member? Who's the most boring family member? A family vacation, a Christmas celebration. I mean, you just think of all of those things. Before long, the one word family becomes a separate category altogether of wonderful stories. So I encourage everyone to think about their lives as fertile ground to tell stories, which hopefully you can then connect back to your business applications as a pro speaker, or simply entertaining speeches, or ways also to have conversation. Because everybody wants to hear a story and not so much about PowerPoint slides. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, but I'm confused now. So what you're saying is that I shouldn't get lost on a mountain and chop off my arm so I have a good story to tell on stage. I might have heard you give that advice before, but I'm not sure I got the right.
Well, the thing is, I think in our minds, many people in their minds believe for a story to be effective, it has to have an air of sensationalism. I had to climb Mount Everest, backwards, barefoot, uphill, both ways, and on the way down, chop my arm off to escape. That's dramatic. It is dramatic. But sometimes the simplest stories don't have to have drama of that magnitude. They simply have to connect heart to heart with an individual who's hearing the story. Most of my stories that I find very effective are simple family stories, simple stories about a phone call with somebody I know, an experience I had recently that made me go, wow. I don't have a great deal of sensational stories. I get some of the simplest and most powerful responses when I talk about relationships, I talk about mistakes, and everyday activities. I was in Germany back in 2017 at a Toastmasters event, actually, and I was telling the story about my winning the world championship in public speaking. You may have heard it before, Francisco. I'll keep it very short. I'll give you the Reader's Digest condensed version of the story. My wife, Andrea, our three children, David was probably 10 months old, and 8 and 11, had flown from New York to San Diego, literally coast to coast, 5 hours in a plane to get to San Diego for the Toastmasters convention, where I was competing in the world championships. As you know, I won that contest. I was crowned the world champion that day. And I brought my family on stage for the photographs and so on to celebrate with me. My daughter was holding my trophy. My baby was in my wife's arms. And my young guy was just proud, and daddy was there. And while we're on the platform, cameras are flashing. My daughter had an envelope with a greeting card, and she put it in my hand. And I couldn't open it at the time. I was, photo op, smiling and everything. And we were there for like 2 hours with handshakes and congratulations. The kids, Daddy, want to go to the pool? Fine. Go ahead. I'll catch up with you. I get to the room, take off my coat, and cards in the coat pocket. I pulled the card out, unsealed the envelope, because it said Daddy. So my kid sent me a card. I unsealed the envelope, pulled out the card, and read my children's words. Daddy, I'm proud of you. Daddy, we knew you could do it. And David, of course, who was 11 months, he wrote, scribbled on it. I turned to my wife, Andrea. Honey, look what the kids did. They got me this really cool card. She said, yes, darling, but you don't understand what happened. No, well, the kids got me an awesome card. Listen to me, honey. Shut up and listen to me. Your kids, they went looking for that card. They found the right card for you, and they bought that card with your money. I know it was a great card. Listen to me, honey. They bought the card. They signed the card. They put it in the envelope. They sealed the envelope before we left New York to come to California. Because that's how much your kids believe in you. Wow. Sweaty eyeballs in Germany that day. Because they could see these little kids who are proud of Daddy, who believe in Daddy, who have faith in Daddy, showing their faith in Daddy by sealing the envelope before they even got on the plane. And every time I think about that true story, I think to myself, man, if that's the kind of faith my kids have in me, what do I need to do to maintain that faith and to live a life that's worthy of that faith? And there are different ways you can take the story as you see fit. But my hope is when someone hears that story, they question, does someone have that kind of faith in me? And if they do, am I worthy of it? Am I living up to it? And am I willing to show that kind of faith in somebody else who I love, who I believe in, who I trust? Am I showing them I have faith in them? So there's so many ways your brain can take that. But I shared a story to tell you how meaningful my family is to me and to prove to you that even in a business environment, family stories are effective. One of the best testimonials I ever received was from a conference chairperson for a national insurance company here in North America. I was the closing keynote. My whole purpose was to listen to the entire convention for 3 days, attend sessions, take notes, and be the one to wrap it up at the very end with the idea of performance excellence, going out there and being the best that you can be with what you learned over the last 3 days. Cool. That's the assignment. I did a presentation, and Chris, the chairman, came and gave me a 23-second testimonial, which I have on video, by the way, and he said it was amazing. It was the best closing we've ever had. Mark Brown inspired us to be our best. I'm going to go home. I'm going to hug my kids. And I'm going to do something better tomorrow. That last line, I'm going to hug my kids and do something better tomorrow, was a blessing to me for this reason, Francisco. I told the story about my kids and what they mean to me. And he was able to connect the mission, do something better tomorrow, with the family, hug my kids. So even in a business environment, corporate convention, the stories of my family were a connector to him as the human being and the dad, and the message of excellence still rung true for the corporate message. So my point is, if you use the right stories in the right way, we can bridge the gap between the corporate and the technical and touch the human, and that's what makes you memorable. When they can connect the message of the business to real life, that makes you a winner. That's my experience and my perspective.
I think it's a beautiful story, and what I would never recommend you do is ask your wife, Andrea, if by any chance she had a separate envelope that the kids had also
We're not going to go there.
Just in case Daddy needed a pick-me-up.
We're not going to go there. Well, don't forget now, that was 1995. And in 1994, I had been to the World Championship, and I had lost. But I had learned. And when you lose, you should learn. I was coaching high school football in New York, soccer to North Americans, and the head coach of the school, I was assistant coach and goalkeeping coach. And he always told the kids, you win or you learn. Not you win or you lose. You win or you learn. So I had learned in 94 from my losses through the help of a wonderful coach and mentor, David Brooks, the 1990 world champion. But I want to call back something you said earlier with the second person who helped me. The man who won that contest in 94, Morgan MacArthur, the 94 world champion, became a very, very dear friend of mine. And whenever I failed and I had a bad day, I'd call him crying and he'd say, veterinarian, he'd say, get back on the horse, keep going. And he'd really pick me up. But earlier you talked about the polished style of Toastmasters, the drama and all of that. Morgan MacArthur was second in 93 and he came back and won in 94. But he told a very simple story of the night before the contest. He was asked by his friends to come and have a nightcap, have a drink, relax. The contest is tomorrow. You're easy. Just relax. He says, no, I can't join you. I have to go work on my speech one more time. What do you mean work on your speech? Dude, the contest is 10 hours away. You can't change it now. That thing is locked in. What do you mean you can work on your speech? And Morgan said, yeah, I have to go and take some of the polish off. I have to go and take some of the polish off. Because he understood then that being overly dramatic and being, having his elocution was not really who he was. He was genuinely a fun guy with a handlebar mustache, and he was great. He totally won the contest, and he's an amazing guy. And he has taught me so much about the importance of being yourself on the platform. So I was able to connect the previous thought to this as well. So I want to share that with the audience as well. So.
There is a line you neglected to use this time, but I've heard you use before when you were describing the types of stories that you need. And I believe the line was, they don't need to be sensational, they just need to be sincere.
That's correct. Wow, you did do your homework, Francisco. Yes, it is. That is a Marxism. Your story need not be sensational.
Most of this stuff is so easy to remember because you're the king of alliteration or wordplay.
Well, that's.
I'm not trying to, remember like a corporate mission statement here.
Well, you know what? As you mentioned, I remember one guy, an author, he said he wrote his mission statement. He said it was 3 words: don't mess up. Okay, so, but you're right. I've often proclaimed your story doesn't have to be sensational. It has to be sincere. And I have found sincerity and honesty been very, very effective in Toastmasters and also in the corporate world. I mean, even now there's a movement globally where people go in and they do, they give talks about their failures and their mistakes and how they mess up. It's a worldwide movement now, and they have these nights where people tell their failure stories to encourage other people not to make the same mistake, shorten their failure learning curve, and hopefully inspire others to make better choices and decisions going forward. But yeah, you're right. We don't need sensational, like climbing Mount Everest when cutting your arm off, but the sincerity that connects to other human beings, to which they can relate. These are the stories that move us. You look at some of the Goldcast videos and powerful TED Talk videos. They aren't fantastic stories, but we connect, we relate, we have an emotional relationship to it, and we see the power of the message through human beings who are just like us. So the truth is, precious few of us are going to climb Mount Everest. Very few of us are going to go to the moon as an astronaut. Very few of us are going to win 5 Olympic gold medals in swimming like Michael Phelps, or be like my fellow Jamaican Usain Bolt. Very few of us will accomplish all of these things. But most of us live our daily lives with our families, our wives, husbands, our kids, our partners. Most of us all of us make mistakes. All of us can recall our life in school. We know our first job, our favorite teacher when we were in school. We know what we're going through right now in our lives. We understand everyday experiences. Let's talk about those, because that's where we all meet on a level playing field. Our everyday experiences.
I think the fact that what you just talked about, where people that people that have lost a competition like the Toastmasters World Championship, it's common that they lose 1 year and then go on to win a year later or 2 years later, whatever. And that's, if you stop to think about it, that just shows how this idea of having the one story is just complete nonsense. and also for people who don't know how those competitions work, it's even weirder than that, because the competition that the speech that allows you to beat most of the people that you have to beat is not the one you deliver in the final. So if you say, oh, but this is my one story, well, but then why you saving it for last if you get there, or are you trying to get there with that one story?
Some people go through, actually go through that. They have 2 speeches. Do I do that one first or that one second? And when I competed back in the dark ages, you had to have 3 different speeches back then. You could use one. It's a 7-level competition. It was 6 when I was competing. The first 4 you could use one speech: club, area, division, district. Then we had the region, a second speech. You win that, and after that, a third for the final. Now you have one speech: club, area, division, district. You go to a region semifinal. Then you go to a semifinal, level 6, and then you go to the World Championships and you must do a completely new different speech. I believe the idea is everyone has one good speech in them, but to be a champion, you need to prove it not once, but twice. I kind of tease my friends in the 21st century and say, listen, guys, in my day, you had to prove yourself once, twice, 3 times. You had to be really, really good. And the truth is, Francisco, you may know this, many of us have what we call our signature stories. These are the ones that we love, that are ours and nobody else can tell, and we love telling those. But our life experience goes beyond a signature story. It's a series of stories. It's a series of experiences. It's a series of observations that we can then pass on to our audiences as long as we can tie a valid message and point and hopefully call to action from those stories that they'll find inspirational, instructive, educational, or in some way can enrich their lives or even the lives of somebody else who may hear from them the story you have told. So the story has power to move people, to help people, to change people, to instruct people, to inspire people, and to educate people. Stories are powerful.
I have one technical question to ask you about on story, and then I think I've saved the best or the most important.
You always save the best for last. That's all my singing today. Go ahead.
the technical question I have for you, I heard from, this is sort of coincidental, I heard from you, and I don't know if it was just before or just after I started reading Robert McKee's Story. It's a very well-known book for screenwriters, for cinema screenwriters. So I think you were discussing with Darren what you guys call the story diagram, and what he describes when he's talking about a scene is he says every scene has a theme or an emotion, or there's a particular characteristic about every scene. You know, maybe the scene is about life or death, or it's about status versus loss of status, or you're feeling proud or you're feeling miserable. And he says, if the scene does not move that emotion from negative to positive or positive to negative, then it shouldn't be there. That you need to be changing those characters in the story. Otherwise, if the scene is not doing that, then it shouldn't be in your script. And I believe you guys talk about the ending emotion, or for each character, the beginning. What's the beginning emotion, and what's the ending? Or the final emotion.
Yeah, well, the idea is, in the arc of the story, where is the transformation of the character? What did he or she learn going through the experience? It need not be a dramatic story of a significant change. He was a pauper, now he's a millionaire. But if there's some change in the attitude, in the mind, in the action, if the direction is different, if they have a sense of hope, because even some stories don't have a final ending where it's all fully resolved. I think of a film I saw called Where God Left His Shoes, about a man who lost his job, he's losing his home, and he's trying to find a way for him and his family, a place to live and to get a job, and all the struggles he goes through. When the film ends, it stars John Leguizamo. When the film ends, there's no clear definitive answer. Oh, he's now in a home, he's happily ever after. No, the struggle continues. But you see his resolute attitude, you see his determination, you see a mindset that he goes through, that I will find a way through this. So if the main character undergoes some kind of change, if we can see that there's some kind of change in the character, then the story has a purpose for them. If the character becomes linear and nothing changes, then why was the story there? We don't see, there's no benefit, there's no lesson, what's the aftermath? If that particular experience doesn't exist, it's almost, well, you ask yourself, if I took that part of the story out, would it harm or change or affect the message in any way? If the answer is no, then perhaps you don't need that character, that interaction, that particular scene. It doesn't drive the story forward. It doesn't change anything. It's kind of nice to be there. And as presenters, we often do that with words and scenes. It's a nice scene. It doesn't move the character forward or the story forward. It doesn't change anything. So why is it really there? So technically, I think about that. If I remove this character, that dialogue, or that scene, will it harm my presentation? If the answer is no, I give serious thought to, well, do I even need it? So I want to keep it tight and meaningful.
There's a line which it's not yours, but it could be probably. It's what doesn't add, subtract.
I've heard that too. What doesn't add, subtract. And the thing is, it can. I'm not always so strident regarding the subtraction piece because it ends up being like filler. It can subtract if it causes a distraction. In other words, if somebody's wondering, okay, so why was that person even there? I don't see his relevance or her relevance. I don't know why that. So if I'm off thinking about what I just saw, and you're continuing your presentation, telling your story or delivering the movie, I'm going to miss a part of the next scene. I'm left wondering, what was that all about? Why is that hat rolling around on the floor? I don't get it. And I'm distracted looking at the hat on the floor, and you're moving on to something else, and I might miss something.
There is in literature, in theater, there is this expression, Chekhov's gun. And this is from Anton Chekhov, who was a Russian writer. And he said, it's a maxim, he said, if there is a gun on the wall, then in Act 1, by the end of Act 3, this gun needs to have been fired. Because if the gun is not getting fired, then why was it there in the beginning? Because now you're thinking there's a gun there. This gun means something. What is the point of this gun? So the gun has to fire.
Yes.
And yeah, I think a lot of people just put a lot of. We talked about details earlier. People put a lot of details to ground it in reality. But there's a big difference between oral storytelling and a movie.
Right.
In a movie, you see all the details. In oral storytelling, you just need enough details for it to feel authentic and to maybe relate to that character who's doing this thing. Oh, he has to, if it's we're talking about Toastmasters, you can say something about the gestures. Everyone who's ever been in a Toastmasters meeting knows exactly what you mean. But you don't need to say all the 15 things that you could have said. I got it from one. You don't need to get it 20.
That is so true.
Right. So. Yeah.
Very quickly, I know it's going quickly.
Go for it.
Just respond to that. You mentioned the gestures. Very often,
Yeah.
people will say, so, I was really angry, so I put my hands on my hips. Well, don't tell me. Just do it. We know you're angry. We can see it. And the other thing is regarding the gun, sometimes we want to be expressive. We have props, and we want to use props to reinforce the message. But if your prop overtakes the message, if your prop is a distraction, if you leave the suitcase on the floor on your speech the whole time and don't make reference to it, we're wondering what's in the suitcase. That can also be distracting. So you're right. If the gun's going to be there, it's there for a reason. If there's no reason for it, maybe it shouldn't be there. You had one more question, Francisco.
Yes.
The big one.
So, a big one, yes. So the work you did for many years and the work that led straight from the Toastmasters speech and that led to that Emmy nomination was that you were speaking in schools to young children about bullying, essentially. Or among other things, but bullying was one of the big ones. And so what I wanted to ask is, it's kind of a broad question, but I'm sure you can give me plenty of specific examples of that, is, children can be, from everyone that I've ever, before I was a parent, I had to hear this from people, now I know it's true, but they can be one of the toughest audiences there is. Because they're not going to politely watch you while you bomb. They'll fidget, they'll boo. And you in your speech, you talk about Beauty and the Beast is an essential part of your speech is that you're using the Beauty and the Beast story, the Disney cartoon actually,
version,
not the fairy tale.
93.
And so what I wanted to ask you is how did you find that stories were an essential part of connecting with those children and getting them to actually take in the message, because this is not an easy message it's not now an easy message for children to actually do something about it, and I don't think it was an easy message then. So how much of a role did stories, and not just Beauty and the Beast, play in that work you did for many years?
Well, it started with parenting. My kids were 84, 86, so they were 8 years old, 9 years old when the first film came out in 1993. And I've always been one to tell stories to my kids. I read stories to my kids. I become the characters. I'd use certain voices. I would do Sesame Street, Grover, hello everybody, I'm Grover, and kind of all that silly stuff. But I saw that kids were engaged when they hear the story and told with characters as well. And I was literally home one evening watching the Disney cartoon with my children, my two older children at the time. And I saw this powerful message from one scene in the movie. And I physically grabbed my old VCR. For those who are millennials, you look it up on Google. I got my VCR remote control. I physically rewound that video. And anyone who knows video will be familiar with the sound, right? So I rewound the video. And I replayed the scene for my kids. I said, listen to those words. And there's a message there. And I realized my kids got it. And I thought, I thought to myself initially, it's a message for adults. But then I realized it's actually a kid's cartoon, so kids can relate to it. And I gave the version of my speech at my son's elementary school when he was 9 years old, and the kids liked it. And I began to deliver talks in more schools. And I built the program using Beauty and the Beast as an anchor, but I would collect stories of kids I met. I'd go back to my own childhood when I was 10 years old, being bullied by the three mean sixth grade girls in my class, true. And I would tell my stories. I began to show in later years using PowerPoint photographs of myself, black and white of myself when I was 10, 11 years old, how goofy I was. And the kids could relate to a guy who understood them, even though I'm in my 50s at the time. Because when you're 55 and a kid who's 13 tells you you're cool, that's kind of nice. But I was able to relate my own experiences to theirs. I told stories of real kids who were just like them, who were going through what they went through. So I found the stories of people in their situation and my own story, which shows the experience is pretty timeless. So I went back to 1971 and 72 when I told my story. And they realized, hey, he understands because he's been there. The common bond. That became effective. So stories really drove what I did. With kids, I can't be high on concept. With kids, I had to interact. I mean, my opening line for an audience of 800 13-year-olds is, hey, guys, girls, I got good news and I got bad news. What kind of opening is that? I said, yeah, first, the bad news. I have rules. Y'all love rules, right? And naturally, they're going to say, no, we hate rules. I go, well, here's the good news. I only have 2 rules. And I show them 3 fingers. And they laugh at me. Oh, sorry, I have 2 rules. In 15 seconds, I'm not a speaker delivering a lecture. I'm a goofy guy who talks to them, who listens and answers back. Excuse me. Who listens and responds. And they right away, their guard is down. They expect a speaker in a coat and tie. Kids, thou shalt not bully each other. That isn't my approach. I have a conversation. I tell stories. I ask them questions and I challenge them. Have you seen this? I know why you all do this. I've heard that before. Be honest, show of hands. Who's heard that before? And they say, ah. So I converse with them. I interact with them. And it's me, a chair, PowerPoint slides, a packet of pocket tissues, and 800 kids for 45 minutes. And it worked. It worked for 2 decades.
What were your two rules?
My 2 rules. 1, if I ask a question, give me an honest answer. Okay? Don't hold back. Okay, yeah. Okay, no. Yeah. If I ask questions, honest, hold back, give me an honest answer. I got to go back and think about it. I've done talking over a year. 2 rules. Rule number 1, okay. Okay, I'm going to ask questions today. Okay? You must answer them. And 2, honest answer. Don't hold back because you know what? I'm going to be brutally honest with you. Are we okay with that? And they go, yeah. Oh, sorry. Rule one was answer honest questions. Rule number 2 is whatever you do, let's have fun together. So when the rule is have fun, they get that. See.
I actually had the suspicion that you hadn't done that much speaking in the last few months because I heard you on a different show be introduced to the 3,500 speeches, and I was like, at the rhythm he was going, that should have been almost 4,000 by now.
I say more than. I put in more than because I didn't change it bio recently. It's more than.
I'll know that your traveling schedule is back on when you start being introduced in shows as almost 4,000 speeches.
The funny thing is this, honestly, in terms of travel, I have traveled in 2020. I traveled to at least 11 countries from this chair right here, including Vietnam, Bangladesh, Nepal, Saudi Arabia, India, Singapore, the Philippines, Dubai, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. I was in, I've talked to India on Friday. So at least
Spain.
Yeah, there you go. España, right?
Yes.
Barcelona? No?
Yes.
Oh, Madrid? I don't know.
Yeah, Barcelona.
They got spanked by PSG, man. What can I tell you?
I'm Brazilian, so I take the best parts here. The football, it's all from back home.
But the thing is, though, I had the privilege by adjusting to the virtual world to deliver those presentations to all those countries. And one audience I had was 1,000 people. So certainly I know that it's over 4,000 people now because one audience was 879, and I've had several more in the last year. So it's probably literally 6,000 people now I've heard my messages by the virtually or in person. So I need to change that number. Thank you for letting me know that, Francisco. I should change that number.
Mark, if people want more of your Markisms and your wisdom, where's the best place to find you?
My website is markbrownspeaks.com. I try to tweet once in a while at Mark Leo Brown. I am LinkedIn as Mark L. Brown as well. And I'm easy. Look, I'm highly Googleable. The simplest thing is if you look at, if you Google Mark Brown speaker, you'll see the guy with the bow tie out there. But certainly markbrownspeaks.com is a website,
I'll put all that stuff on the show notes. That's great. And I would also recommend that people check out your podcast with Darren LaCroix.
That's right. It's called the Unforgettable Presentations Podcast. We have been broadcasting weekly for 79 weeks in a row now. We give high content. We also interview some of the top speakers in the world. And it's a lot of fun we have together, and you can really learn from that program.
You make regular fun of Darren's limited grasp of the English language.
Well, he tends to make fun of me being a wordsmith. He comes in and he'll bring a dictionary. Hey, I brought my dictionary today, Mark. What's the word here? So like, really, geez, come on, man. But yeah, I really enjoy working with Darren because he and I we really believe in what we have to offer is helpful. We really believe in the power of telling stories. We work together at Darren's Stage Time University. I'm one of his coaches there. We do webinars and we do programs, 2-day workshops every month. And we really want to help people to take the skill of speaking to the next level and go from good to great to unforgettable. So I know you are a master storyteller, and I really appreciate time to share my stories with you as well, because you know what? It's been a good day, my friend, and hopefully your listeners and viewers will take at least one nugget to help them become unforgettable.
I'm sure they will. Thank you very much for your time, Mark.
My pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves, and until next time.